So the upcoming June Nintendo Direct will absolutely prove something, in my personal opinion, about Metroid Prime 4 that all of us Metroid fans have been very curious about this entire time, which is the question: is Metroid Prime 4 going to be a Nintendo Switch release, or will it be a Switch 2 or cross-generational release? Whatever the next gen console's called, that's not what we're focusing on, but is Nintendo's plan to finally release this game during the tail end of the current Nintendo Switch's generation that we find ourselves in now, or is there a world where Nintendo holds on to this game and actually has an enhanced version running on new next gen hardware that will no doubt look and perform better? And if that is indeed the case, what does that mean for the quality expectations for the Nintendo Switch 1 version? Plus, is there a world where Nintendo actually makes this a Switch 2 exclusive and doesn't release it on the current Switch? I want to deep dive all of that, in addition to circling back on some of the rumors around whether or not we should be able to expect Metroid Prime 2 and 3 to at some point be released in the lead up to Metroid Prime 4. So we'll get on the same page with all of that. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first kick it off by talking briefly around the history of Metroid Prime 4 that you may have heard many times online at this point, but this game has had a rocky development cycle. We know originally it was revealed to us in 2017 with just a PNG logo. We really didn't see anything substantial of the game other than the confirmation that it was in development, and that it was in development specifically for the Nintendo Switch, because clearly Nintendo didn't have it on their radar to be talking about the successor console at any point in time in 2017. Well, we got that big update in 2019 that of course confirmed that the development was restarted for this game, and it was handed off to Retro Studios, who of course is the studio responsible for Metroid Prime 1 through 3, and it honestly probably should have been in their hands this entire time. I'm sure Nintendo saw the direction it was headed towards with the current development studio and just decided it's not going to really live up to the scope of what they want Prime 4 to be, which does play into this conversation because I believe that Nintendo really wants to elevate Metroid and give it a new type of momentum that the series has never seen before. We know that this is primarily a niche franchise from all of the major first-party Nintendo IP. While it has a very hardcore fan base that absolutely adores the franchise, and I am one of those people, there are plenty out there that are Nintendo fans that will pick up anything before they look at a Metroid game. Even Metroid Dread, a 2D Metroid game nonetheless, on a Nintendo Switch that has over 140 million install base, just achieved over 3 million copies sold, which is not a bad number by any stretch of the imagination. But when you compare it to the franchises like Zelda, Mario, Animal Crossing, where you're talking about that 20 to 40, even 60 million sold on Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is a little bit of a different story, but you get the idea. There's a huge gap in numbers from something that breaks the 10 million mark somewhat consistently when it comes to being a Nintendo franchise, compared to something that can barely achieve 3 million on a very great top tier game. Granted, you could argue that 2D definitely pulls some modern day players away from taking a second look at a said game, but Zelda used to not do the 20-30 million numbers we're seeing it do between the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom numbers. And by elevating it to that new open world formula that they came up with for Zelda and marketing it correctly, they have been able to do something really unprecedented for the Legend of Zelda franchise, and now it's Nintendo's second announced movie that they will be producing with a live action film. And I think the decision to fully scrap and restart Metroid Prime 4 really tells us just how serious Nintendo is about this game succeeding or really doing something special for the franchise. Not to mention, we have already seen them release Metroid Prime 1 Remastered, which I believe is the true step one to the marketing campaign and lead up for Metroid Prime 4, which will lead me to quickly tackle the conversation portion of whether or not we should expect Prime 2 and 3 before Prime 4 is released. And the answer to that is yes. I do tend to believe the outstanding rumor that I believe was originally stemmed from Jeff Grubb. I believe Nate the Hate and others have chimed in around it online, but the rumor mill speculation talk around Prime 1 Remastered was that it was getting a big boy treatment, lots of new lighting and textures, and of course we saw that ultimately come to pass. What nobody was predicting was the shadow drop of that game, and that did indeed end up happening, so that was a big surprise. And while Grubb was off on the timing on the game, he definitely did not miss when it comes to the game being a real project, and Nintendo kind of just sitting on it in their back pocket like we know they do with numerous games. They are very different than Sony and Microsoft in that regard, and he was the source claiming that Prime 1 Remastered would be a more in-depth project, and 2 and 3 would be more of a HD up-res treatment, but not necessarily all of the reworking of the textures and the lighting that we saw with Prime 1 Remastered, which also fuels my idea that they will likely be released as a combo pack similar to that of Pikmin 1 and 2 HD. When we saw Nintendo bring those games back over, they very much looked like the GameCube originals, but with some quality of life improvements, and they were packaged together just as a way for Pikmin fans to be able to play the entire franchise on current Nintendo Switch hardware. And that's what I believe we will see Nintendo do with Prime 4, because I don't think they're going to release a game with 4 in the title and then they gave us 1 but they don't have any way to provide us to easily play 2 and 3. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I think Prime 2 and 3 are pretty much a shoe-in for a Shadow Drop game at this next upcoming Nintendo Direct that we know to be taking place in June. But the big question I personally believe that this Direct will indeed answer for Metroid Prime 4 is that big one around whether or not this is a Nintendo Switch exclusive release and it's something that you can enjoy on your next gen console via backwards compatibility, or if there is actually already a planned version of this game for Switch 2, at which point you would logically expect it to be launched at the same time, similar to what we've seen Nintendo do with numerous Zelda games over the years, where Twilight Princess releases on the Wii and GameCube as a cross-gen title, even though it came out on the Wii like a month early. That's a whole thing in and of itself. But Breath of the Wild, perfect example, launches on the Wii U and the Switch day one, and it's not out of Nintendo's wheelhouse to do that with certain games. So would Metroid Prime 4 be the perfect candidate for this to potentially happen? Well, my opinion is if we do indeed see it show up at this Nintendo Direct, we will know something about the game. If we get a release date for it, then I do believe that it could be a Switch 1 release date. Of course it will be if it's in 2024. That's a given. If we see 2024 in the title at all, it's coming out for Switch first, and then we're probably only enjoying the game via backwards compatibility on the next gen console. However, if it just says 2025, we might be looking at a secretive Switch 2 project that has a cross-generational release, but Nintendo's not going to communicate that to us at this Direct, and that's also a very real possibility that I could see Nintendo doing. They won't go out of their way to throw a Switch 2 logo on there, but they might just throw a 2025 at the end of it, and we won't know if it's a Switch 2 cross-generational launch or not. But is there then a world where Nintendo might choose to only release this on Switch 2 and not Switch 1 at all? And while that is obviously a possibility that Nintendo could choose to go with, I definitely believe that. And if you looked into the leaks and rumors around this game's development and the hiring posts and things, it seems very much confirmed that there is a Switch 1 version of this game, and I don't think Nintendo's scrapping that. So there is a chance it's cross-gen. I don't think it misses the Nintendo Switch though. And you can look at certain game testers and developers actually listing in their LinkedIn profiles and things that getting projects specifically naming Metroid Prime 4 to run at 60 frames per second on the Nintendo Switch was one of their job responsibilities. So not only are we supposed to expect some great looking visuals from Retro, I think they will be squeezing every last drop of juice out of the Nintendo Switch that they can. And if there is a cross-generational title planned for Switch 2, it will probably just look that much better, less texture compression, maybe even a higher frame rate than 60, although I don't think it necessarily needs that. Could we be talking about Metroid Prime 4 running at 120 on the Switch 2? I guess depending on how much of a visual quality gap there is between the two, but nonetheless probably more ray tracing effects and things that we know to expect in the Switch 2 with things like DLSS, ray reconstruction, and all of that. Like, all of that stuff will probably be cranked up to maximum, and it will be visually more simple on the Switch today. But I don't think there's any chance we see Nintendo just scrap the Switch support for this, especially considering that their original commitment was to release this on the Nintendo Switch, and they have not communicated anything different from that plan so far. So the big question now becomes, what happens if we don't see anything Metroid Prime at this Nintendo Direct? And I think that would also confirm to us that Prime 4 will be a cross-gen title, because if it's not shown at this summer showcase, they need time to market this game, they need time to ramp it up, and I think it's going to be one of their bigger releases that they don't just throw out kind of a month or two before it drops, but rather they will show us some kind of big cinematic trailer that gets us hyped as a part one. Then we'll see it again months and months down the road, and it will kind of be drip fed to us until it finally launches with its big reveal. So my thought process is if it's here, we'll know more about it very soon, and if it's not here, then you can pretty much more or less come to the conclusion that we're going to see some version of this game natively available for Switch 2, probably as a launch title. But that's my thoughts and opinions on it. This is where I really want to hear from you guys at this point in the video. What do you think we're going to see ultimately take place for Metroid Prime 4? Do you think that it will indeed be at this summer Direct, and we might learn about it being the holiday 2024 game and we see that 2024 year thrown on the end of the trailer? Or do you think that Nintendo might show us the game and it has 2025 at the end and then it is indeed a cross-gen title? Or do you think there's a world where it's only released on the Switch 1 but it still comes out in 2025 as a game that's kind of finished after the new console launches and you can play it on the new console with backwards compatibility but it's still only for Switch? Or do you think maybe Nintendo would do the unthinkable and make it just a Switch 2 exclusive and there's no Switch 1 version at all? And finally, are you hopeful like me that we will indeed see Metroid Prime 2 and 3 shadow dropped at the upcoming Nintendo Direct? Or do you think there's a world that Nintendo skips that idea and just releases Prime 4 without giving us 2 and 3 playable on the current Switch we have today? So thanks so much for watching the video today, everyone. Make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.